Welcome and thanks for coming back. My name is Karleigh, and I'm here to lead you down the path of this dark elfanovela, Book 1 of the Tales of Eldelórne. In our last episode, we left off with Rovach and Edhellen having a terrible fight. Thendiel was struggling with how to tell them about her problems and never did find the right time. But now we go into chapter 4, where everything is inevitable. Chapter 4, Her Final Hour. Faded and weak, Thendiel had walked through the Illian gardens and across the long wooden footbridge for the last time. This place where I've lived the days of my life, it has so soon come to an end. Everything would be changed for us on the morrow, and I cannot stop it. Thendiel wailed in anguish, clutching the top of the last bridge post for support. She wanted to just lay down and give in, to stop the pain, but she couldn't let that happen, not after resisting all this time. The threads of her life in this realm were pulled taut and unraveling back into the void where she had trespassed so many years ago. There were final preparations to make before morning's first light. Thendiel strengthened her resolve. Light rain clattered down through the branches, soaking the ground. Hastily wiping her face on the edge of her damp sleeve, she swung her long hair over her shoulder as she stepped onto the stone path to Eldelórne. Moving quickly under the full moon, Thendiel hoped the cool rain would diminish the signs of her weeping eyes. She could see her home was dark, except for the blue starlight she knew was hanging in Ro's window at the top of their beautiful tree. A slight smile crossed her lips, thinking of the tiny blue beacon and the king who loved her. Entering the doorway, she ran her hands along the smooth insides of her home. Usually her touch would signal her arrival, but on this night her message was telling of her final departure when the dawn broke over the land. The trees in their empathy sent back a wave of sadness, almost drowning her mind with their many concerns. No, please, no! She almost fell to her knees in the barrage of too many voices. The grove quickly calmed themselves and continued to quietly sing impassioned comfort to ease her mind. The whole village of trees now understood what frail and desperate state she was in. Thendiel was sending her sons to the king's palace. She expressed her desire for their safety. They would be alone for a time, waiting for Elendil to collect them. "He will keep my sons safe," she murmured to herself. She entreated their living home to help them as best it could. Her home tree sent back a solemn promise to ease her troubled heart. Taking one last look around, Thendiel took off her precious amulet. She carefully placed it in an old wooden box with her diary. The glittering stone went dark as it lost contact with her body. Let them find this when they're older. It may ease my sons' minds someday. Her tree spoke quiet acknowledgment of her wishes as she placed her only treasures in the home's hidden cache. Their tree home had witnessed this kind of leaving before. It would hold to its promise and wait, no matter how long it took, because it knew that the elves would always return, and the trees had patience. Thendiel anxiously climbed the stairs to see her young ones as they were sleeping. Rovash slept alone in his own room most times now. He had grown so tall, he could easily be mistaken for a human boy of maybe 16, she guessed. As Thendiel sat next to him on his bed, her eyes narrowed sadly, remembering the times they had. "You are your beloved father's son. I can see his kind face in you," she breathed out a long sigh. "I pray you make good choices and have the strength to carry on after I'm gone from here. My little dear, keep our small family safe." She felt the sting in her nose as rising tears turned it red again. Watching Rovash sleep peacefully in the glow of his starlight, she was comforted by the sound of her son's steady breathing. Thendiel sat for a long time with her hand on her son's arm. Edhellen lay curled up, half asleep in his mother's bed. He could see her in the soft light of the burning candle set on the side table as she entered the room. "Mother, are you crying?" He knew she was suffering somehow and wanted to help her if he could. "I'm sorry, my little one. I've tried to tell you, both of you, but it is my weakness to share only happiness with my beloved sons." She looked at him tearfully. "The king is sending horses for me in the morrow as the sun rises." "Horses?" He was confused. "Oh, my sweet Edhellen." She wished he was sleeping so he might have one last night of peace, but now she had to tell him what was going to happen. It would not be right to say, "All is well," when clearly it was not. She wept openly, unable to hold the flood back. "Your innocence has always filled my heart with such gladness. I found so much joy in having you and your brother in my life." "Are you going somewhere, Mother?" Edhellen's huge eyes regarded her tearful face, and fear gripped inside his gut. "I am so weak. Can you not see I am faded? I'm being called away to Ilmatar. I have made arrangements to give you over to our king's care. He will treat you as his own for the sake of me." Edhellen's face froze in horror at the thought of her leaving and being in so much pain. He was too young to understand all that she had just told him. "Mother," was all he could say, and he began to cry with her. Thendiel bundled her young elfling tight in her arms, as if she would never let him go. Her agony eased as invisible light shimmered around mother and son. They fell tearfully asleep in the protective glow that took away his mother's pain. When morning arrived, Thendiel was but a faint and ghostly shell. Rovash stubbornly refused to understand the plans she had set for them and blamed Edhellen for her suffering. "You are too young, mother," Rovash cried out, holding her to his bosom. He towered over her, having grown an almost 6-foot stature. He was shocked to find her so frail as a wisp in his arms. "Be wise, my brave son." Her eyes were haunted by the distant thrumming of Lord Untuoni's persistent call. "You know I must journey on to Ilmatar's peace across the sea. This is the way of our kind, once we're worn of this mortal life." "Tell me I will see you again," he keened in grief. "Yes, Rovash, you are Edhellen, even though you may not always feel it. You are my son. Be noble and true as I know you are, and you will always find your way to me." Ro hung his head in shame at her words. "Come on, Rovash. You know I will be waiting joyously on the shores with all our kin, singing boldly the song of my love for you." Thendiel took her ring off and slipped it onto her eldest son's smallest finger. He cringed at her actions, not wanting her beautiful ring to become a symbol of her leaving. Looking him directly into his eyes, she said firmly, "Do not blame your brother, for this was my doing and my own choices that have brought me to this." Ro blushed in shame again for his desire to point blame. "I am ugly and not kind as I should be." He tortured himself with such thoughts. "But I will try harder, mother," was all he could say to her in his defense through tears and growing frustration. She sadly pulled away from his embrace, for the time had come. Thendiel kissed both her beloved sons goodbye and then turned to leave. The king's attendants silently lifted her up onto the light gray steed that would carry her in such weakness. The line of elves glowed in a ghostly pallor and turned to mere shadow in the morning mist as they traveled away to their final destination. "Do you not have something to say for yourself?" Rovash's swollen, tear-stained face swung around and bellowed at Edhellen through clenched teeth. His little brother looked wretchedly small and pale as he silently watched the shadow that was the last of their mother moving out of sight. Rovash again, sounding too loud and too angered in his frustration as their eyes locked, saw only the deepest of shared grief in his brother. But it was too late. Edhellen blinked his huge eyes, and a flood of tears splashed out onto the stone path. Slowed as in a dream, he turned and whisked away within the echo of his brother's voice. Shamed again by his actions, Rovash could only watch in horror as the form of his brother faded and disappeared into the mist. "No!" he shouted into emptiness. "What have I done?" In that moment of shock, his heart changed, and he wished he could take it all back. In blind frustration, he tore his mother's ring off his hand and dropped it harshly to the ground. Stunned and utterly alone, he fell to his knees, sobbing. All the years of taunting and fool's games he had put Edhellen through, he had somehow forgotten how to be a good brother. He repented in his anguish, but now it was too late. Edhellen was gone somewhere, and he did not know how or where to find him. In the days that followed, the elves of the village looked upon Rovage suspiciously, as if he'd done some harm to his brother. They were not sure that he wouldn't have. In denial of what his eyes had witnessed, Rovage spent all his time desperately searching the woodlands and asking in neighboring settlements to the west, but found not a sign of Edhellen. "It's as if he just vanished before my eyes," Rovage pondered, reliving the scene over and over in his head. "I have to look farther," he suffered in his thoughts, "or I will have failed my promise to our mother." He hung his head in sorrow. "Before my life is gone from this realm, I would be known as true-hearted and not a monster in the eyes of my own brother," he vowed to himself. The murmuring and whispers of the neighbors were more than Ro could stand. He had lost both his mother and his brother on the same day. Feeling desolate and alone, Ro put his mother's ring in a hidden place in his room. He took what little he would need in his belt and shoulder pack. Rovage set out from the safety of the hidden village of Eldelórne and all that he had ever known into the vast, unfamiliar realm of men. The king's emissary arrived and found Thendiel's home closed in hibernating slumber, and her young ones were gone. The village told him the incident as they had heard it, and that the eldest ran away in shame. There were no eyewitnesses that could tell him what really happened on that day. All he could do was turn around and go back to the palace to report to the king. The king sent his guard just in time, and we learn the name of Lord Untuoni, who is the god of undying sleep in the spirit realm. She is the one who has been sending out the spirit song to call all the elves back to Ilmatar. Young elves are very immature for a very long time, as seen with Rovage accidentally scaring his brother away. And now he has this great idea to travel into the human realm. This is not one of Rovage's most brilliant moments, I can tell you that right now. If you want to know what happens next, hit the follow button and I will send you new episodes as they become available. See you next time. Bye-bye. Elvish lesson of the day. Edarnin pedid Edhellen, Nanithnin pedid Edhellen. Okay, I just asked you if your father speaks Elvish and if your mother speaks Elvish. But you already knew what pedid Edhellen meant from lessons before. So Adar and Nanith are father and mother. You guys are getting real smart. Yeah.